The tour we all wanted, but not the tour we are getting. The kind of reaction that we're seeing in the last few days from rugby's greatest rivalry, due to the sort of slow uptake that we've kind of seen in both on-field performances from local sides, as well as ticket prices and the likes within the first couple of weeks of rugby's greatest rivalry. Now, we are all starting to ramp up for Test week. And I mean, Rusty Rasmus yesterday was absolutely spectacular in his press conference, brought out Yaku paper, through our chats about the whole 30-second time wasting situation at lineouts and scrums and the likes of that. Changed his team announcement date down to Thursday, the latest it's been all year, and threw out a couple of jabs as well. He definitely threw a few punches during that press conference. But the main thing we need to look at in terms of rugby's greatest rivalry is what have we had so far and what are we going to see? There's no doubt that the test match series is going to be epic. We know this. It was always going to be good. The crowds are going to be decent despite the ticket prices, or they're not sold out. And you think that a game of this sort of proportion on Saturday, number one and two versus in the world at Ellis Park, that should have been started a while ago. You can still go buy tickets, albeit not many tickets. But also rumors that on Tuesday, the Lions versus All Blacks have sold just 6,000 tickets so far. And again, you've got to look at the ticket prices as to why. Tickets starting now with them being cut as low as 250 Rand, but it's still 250 Rand, after you've just been asked to potentially buy test tickets or prep for the F&B game or been to Loftus, the likes of that, it just isn't very practical. And I think if we look at the calendar of this tour, that has kind of been the biggest problem. We've not been able to get the URC sides up to scratch ahead of time. We've not been able to spread the load on the wallet. I think that's a really important thing. If we look at the where the sort of international season has landed between July and basically the first week of September, we've had 2 months where our South African sort of fans have been expected to shell out all the various different money for all the various different tickets at a time where things are very expensive at the end of the day. So let's get into it, shall we? And I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Now, my biggest frustration is I don't understand from a scheduling point of view why we have landed within this calendar. I'm sure there are a lot other reasons, and obviously I'm part of those conversations. But if you just look at how long the All Blacks are playing for, how long the Box are playing for, even the URC franchise is speaking about the fact that they would have liked to have had more time. I think that this tour should not have even started yet. And if they'd gone with that sort of route, we probably could have been we had a much better product. And this needs to be a learning for moving ahead and kind of getting this right in the future, because we need to make sure that that this improves as a product. So if we look at over here, we've had 6 matches, 1 province in 9 weeks. So and what I mean by that, if we go look at the England and the Scotland games being in Joburg and Loftus, within 9 weeks, by the time we get to the F&B Stadium, there are 6 matches, between the 4 race rugby rivalry and the 2 tests that the rugby public within Gauteng has been asked to buy tickets. And let's be honest, it's largely the same audience. Yes, Gauteng is the biggest population and per capita in the country, but money isn't just going to grow on trees as a result of that. I think we've grossly underestimated how much the cost of living crisis is impacting the fans. And because we haven't really spread the load around, Gauteng has had to bear the brunt in terms of being expected to try and fill the stadiums. Now, a lot of people are sitting there saying, "Oh, but look at Cape Town. They'll sell out." But the game in Cape Town against the Western Stormers was the first match they've had all year. They didn't have any tests, and they're only going to get 1 test. So the fact that they're going to have 2 matches versus Gauteng's 6 matches, and I'm in Gauteng, I mean, it's great over here. It's very practical for us, but we're not seeing the crowds that we would like to have seen. And if we look at that schedule, 4th of July up to the 5th of September, lots happening within Gauteng. There's also been 8 match days in 11 weeks. We also had the Barbarians down in Gqeberha, not a good crowd in there. Ellis Park, they had slash tickets to try and get people in. And, if we look at then 8 matches in 11 weeks, Rassie Erasmus is always going to be quite hesitant to be able to release players back to the franchises, given the very little and very limited and very important time he has with his squad. I don't think we're ever going to really see. I mean, the fact that we had a Argentina game at the same time, same weekend as a Stormers game, and it was always going to be impossible to be able to release a decent amount of players back. Then we look at the URC teams and their lack of prep, and there were 57 days between the Bulls' last match on the 19th of June and when they turn up against the All Blacks. Now, during those 57 days, they had to have an off season where you need to go away and switch off. Now, you're supposed to have about 4 to 5 weeks off a year as rugby players in terms of a my players welfare thing. So what teams would have ideally liked to have done, and this is what we see with even your Ireland, your Northern Hemisphere sides, is that post the season, they get a month off. After sort of 5 weeks, they'll literally go away for the entire kind of like. I mean, if they weren't playing the All Blacks here, I don't think the Bulls players would have seen Loftus until August. They would have gone away maybe the last week or two of July. But that's the thing. They would only start their prep now, and they had to cut the preseason short and still not have a full preseason. So they haven't been able to play any warm games, for example. There was a truncated off season. And you're obviously not going to have your Springboks, which is something you have to navigate. And as a result, our URC teams have been underbacked. It's not an excuses thing. It's just a reality of where they are. What I would have changed is that the tour should have kicked off on the 29th of August. And that would have given every single franchise at least another 3 to 4 weeks worth of prep, which means they would have gone into the end of August. They could have had a relatively, it could have had a month off and still had a 6 weeks preseason to kind of get involved. Because that when it says 7 weeks franchise prep is scheduled, that includes an off season versus 10 weeks, where you could have had a 4-week off season and a 6-week preseason, not a 4-week off season and a 3-week preseason. So what you then get is getting a full preseason from the URC. You can get the Argentina test done. I would have brought the Blizzard Cup forward for the All Blacks, and they could have had those two sort of games as build up towards the games. It means that the All Blacks would have had a couple more, another home game, for example, and it would have given the Wallets a chance to recover down over here, because you wouldn't have had to have had people buying test tickets during July as well as August as well as September. That's the thing. Every month we've had a test in Johannesburg and Pretoria. So we've got to try and deal with that. It also hasn't really lined up with school holidays and the likes of that. So all of a sudden, if we had moved it to the 29th, you would have been able to have basically had an August reprieve from a test tickets point of view, and then buy for September. The big thing as well is moving towards the country. And this is something I really want to sort of is the fact that we didn't see games in Mbombela, we didn't see games in Bloemfontein or Gqeberha, apart from Barbarians. And I think we've missed out on markets there. Even if you had taken, and the Stormers at the CHL Stadium was great, and the attendance was good. But I mean, if that was going to be a midweek game, for example, possibly moving it like a Donny Craven and Stellenbosch could have been an interesting move. But I think we've missed out on Mbombela, we've missed out on Bloemfontein. So I think we would have built big crowds there. Obviously, it's practically a bit more challenging, inverted commas, but I think that they're so close that a flight there is not even an hour. So you could have had the All Blacks flying to these places on the evening before. And I think we could have had your Bulls game and your Lions game at these two venues. I think the Bulls could have gone north up to Mbombela and played against the All Blacks there. Yes, the Bulls don't necessarily get their home ground, but you get to get a big crowd. And I think, Nelspruit's always going to be bull friendly. They were the Limpopo Bulls, and they've always had their partnership going over there. Bloemfontein used to be part of the Cats, so I still think you'd get a reasonable amount of support for the Lions there. And if you want to go up on the game, then you potentially can. But I think that you would, and a lot of people saying, what about you can get the game the Cheetahs themselves, which I don't think we would have seen much of a different result. I think you kind of have to go with your URC franchises. But by simply moving those two games, all of a sudden you could have had a packed out stadiums. I think full of stadium. I think if this game was happening in Bloemfontein on next week Tuesday, I think you would have had more than 6,000 tickets sold. And then you can really sort of take the tour to the entire country. In terms of what you would have gotten back for that, we could have had an opportunity for the franchise to actually compete. We could have had full houses in potentially new markets, and it could have been an event, a really, really big event. At the moment, it's kind of just felt like a bit of sort of fixture pile-up. The biggest problem is that it's all been a financial decision, and this is why Baltimore was always going to happen. Because a lot of people ask me, what is this test? But they're looking at trying to bring in $4 to $6 million from moving it away from South Africa. And we've spoken previously about the fact that they've trying to go down the private equity route, that they're trying to find more and more ways to monetize things. I mean, that's why the 2 billion rand revenue. So that's the thing. They've really chased the money, but I think they've obviously lost a lot of money out to ticket sales. So had we moved the tour back 3 weeks, we would have had from 4 Gauteng and tweak some of the today's, we would have gone from 4 fixtures in Gauteng down to 2, which also meant that your Gauteng people would have had to have prioritized those fixtures and get the tests. You would have gone to 2 new markets where people haven't really had to shell out and be able to get access to it. And I think that you would have gotten a better result. So the question is, would you have moved it? What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash the like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.